Hi, welcome back to Devotions from History. Today, March 22nd, marks the day in 1621 when a momentous meeting occurred. It was a chance meeting, but it was a meeting that changed history. And looking back, maybe it wasn't such a coincidence. Now you know that in November of 1620, a group of people arrived from England on the shores of Cape Cod in a ship called the Mayflower. Now that first winter for the Pilgrims was not an easy one, and just about half of them died. And when come springtime, they really didn't know how they were going to survive the rest of the time. There was talk of going back home and letting the experiment come to an end. When on March 22nd, into Plymouth Colony marched Samoset, an Indian they had met earlier, and he came with another Indian who was wearing white man's clothes and could speak English. And not only did he know the language of the Pilgrims, but he intimately knew the land that they were living on. Now, how did that come to be? Well, it's an interesting story. The Indian's name was Tesquantum. The English called him Squanto because Tesquantum was kind of hard to say. When Tesquantum was a younger man, he had been captured by European slave traders and taken away from his village, from his family, and his home, sailed across the Atlantic, and sold as a slave. Eventually, he came to live with some Spanish monks who gave him his freedom and worked to get him to England, where he could catch a ship, to go back across the Atlantic. It took several years, but finally Tesquantum was on his way home. But unfortunately, when he arrived at his home on the shores of what we know as Cape Cod, he found that his entire tribe, the Patuxets, had been wiped out by a white man's disease, smallpox. Chief Massasoit took him in, but he had a hard time fitting in. He was what some Indians call today an apple. Red on the outside, but white on the inside. Not an easy thing to be. When one day Samoset came in and said that some white men had taken to living on Tesquantum's family land. Well, on March 22nd, Tesquantum went with Samoset to meet these people. And it turned out that he knew exactly what they needed to do to survive on that land. It was his ancestral land, after all. And somehow, Tesquantum found it in his heart to help these white people, people who represented the very thing that had taken him from his home, put him into slavery, and brought a disease that had wiped out his entire family and village. Now, I'm sure it had to have been hard for Tesquantum that day to walk onto his family land and see those white men living there. They were suffering and close to packing it in. And I'm sure it would have been easy for him to just let them go. But instead, he chose to help them because he had the very knowledge that they needed to survive. He knew their language and could communicate with them, and he knew the land they were living on and how to survive on it. Now, Squanto's story makes me think a lot of Joseph in the Bible. It seemed like bad thing after bad thing happened to Joseph. And yet somehow God was arranging history so that Joseph was right where he needed to be to save a group of people. Matter of fact, it was the same group of people that he saved that had been so mean to him earlier, his own brothers. The similarities with Squanto's story are amazing. And I think we have something to learn from Squanto. Are you the kind of person that will allow the pain that has come into your life to be used to help somebody else, maybe even somebody else who is like the person who gave you the pain to start with? Wow, what a lesson in forgiveness and depth of character. And if there's anything that our history needs today in the 21st century, it's people who have the depth of character that we see in men like Tesquantum and Joseph. Now for you, whatever the pain that may have come into your life in the past, ask God today to show you how you can use that pain to change history.